My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to 106.7 Wilmington's Big Talker. I'd like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Sunday at 5 p.m. we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. I direct Grassroots North Carolina, or GRNC, since 1994, our state's most effective gun rights organization. As its director, I was involved in drafting and passing our original concealed handgun law. Since then, GRNC has gone on to engineer passage of concealed handgun reciprocity, our purchase permit bypass, castle doctrine and stand your ground, the expansion of concealed carry into state and municipal parks, restaurants, public assemblies, educational properties, and much more. Grassroots North Carolina is exactly what the name implies, a grassroots collection of volunteers from all walks of life who share a common concern that our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms are being eroded. Check us out at grnc.org. That's grnc.org. Hopefully you enjoyed the 4th of July weekend, despite Independence Day being the latest American holiday denounced by the left as jingoistic, insensitive, and hopelessly nationalist. In fact, now that I think of it, how dare you celebrate such a racist holiday, you insensitive SOB. By now, you've heard that the original Betsy Ross American flag is an offensive symbol of racism. And now we have NFL quarterbacks dictating how we should celebrate our holiday. Of course, based on the comments that Nike's sneakers with the Betsy Ross flag on them are somehow offensive, Nike pulled the line. Of course, Nike says it acted for the common good, claiming it pulled the shoe based on, quote, concerns that it could unintentionally offend and detract from the nation's patriotic holiday. Yeah, detract from the nation's patriotic holiday. That's the ticket. Or maybe they decided they could make more money by pandering to their I Hate America market demographic at the expense of the rest of the country. On the upside, however, please allow me to note that the National Republican Senate Committee has an attractive Betsy Ross flag t-shirt available for a minimum donation of only $20. Just saying. Then, of course, the leftists couldn't help but hate on the very notion of Donald Trump organizing an Independence Day celebration on the grounds of the Lincoln Memorial, complete with Time magazine snarking about the fact that some of the tickets were given out free, and leftists complaining about, of all things, the cost. This from people who want to provide unaffordable Medicare for all at the cost of untold trillions of dollars, demonstrating yet again that the hypocrisy of the left knows no limits. Then, of course, Every Town for Gun Safety, the AstroTurf creation of billionaire and would-be dictator Michael Bloomberg, just had to chime in, tweeting out, and I quote, "Consider gun violence survivors on the 4th of July. Every day, an average of 100 Americans are fatally shot, and hundreds more are shot and injured. If you're planning to set off fireworks to celebrate the 4th, consider letting members of your community know so those who might be sensitive to loud noises can prepare themselves." Yeah, loud noises, though they're the killers, all right. Personally, I had a wonderful Independence Day, a day filled with American traditions. In my little town of 1400 here in western North Carolina, I found hope, however fleeting, that America might still be alive. The town shut down Main Street and hosted an event which drew revelers from hundreds, even thousands of miles away. People with American flags. People enjoying a band playing traditional American music, children dancing to that traditional American music, and yes, a traditional American fireworks display. Looking around me, I felt I had been transported to 1965, and that was a very good thing. But some conservatives aren't so sure we should be celebrating. Listen to what Fox News senior judicial analyst Andrew Napolitano had to say about Independence Day in our current era. The Declaration of Independence, released on July 4, 1776, was Thomas Jefferson's masterpiece. Jefferson himself wrote much of it in essays and letters during the 50 years, in essays and letters during the 50 years that followed. Not the least of what he wrote offered his view that the Declaration and the values that it articulated were truly radical, meaning they reflect 180-degree changes at the very core of societal attitude in America. The idea that farmers and merchants and lawyers could secede from a kingdom and fight and win a war against the king's army was the end result of the multi-generational movement that was articulated in the Declaration and culminated in the American Revolution. The two central values of the Declaration are the origins of human liberty and the legitimacy of popular government. When Jefferson wrote that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, he was referring to the natural law, that right and wrong can be discerned and truth discovered by the exercise of human reason, independent of any commands from the government. The natural law also teaches that our rights come from our humanity, not from government, and our humanity is a gift from our Creator. Even those who question or reject the existence of a creator can embrace natural rights. They can accept that our exercise of human reason leads us to make all similar claims. Rights are essentially claims made against others, including the government. These claims, free speech, free association, free exercise or non-exercise of religion, self-defense, privacy, property ownership, and fair treatment from the government, to name a few, are rights that we all exercise without giving a second thought to the fact that they are natural and come from within us. The view of the individual as the repository of natural rights was not accepted by governments in 1776. Back then, governments rejected that idea and used violence to suppress it. For the government here in the mid-18th century, the king was divine and could do no wrong. The parliament existed as the people's representatives, not as the people's representatives, but to help the king raise money and to give him a read on the pulse of landowners and nobility. Jefferson and his colleagues had no difficulty breaking from this ancient regime. Unlike the French, who destroyed their monarchy, the American colonists seceded from theirs, and they did so embracing natural rights. Regrettably, they did not recognize the natural rights of American slaves or women. We all know and profoundly lament and are still correcting the sorry history of those errors. The idea that each human being possesses inherent natural rights by virtue of one's humanity is not just an academic argument. It has real-life consequences, which Jefferson recognized. Those consequences are implicated when government seeks to curtail rights for what it claims is the common good or the good of the government itself. Jefferson recognized that you can consent to the curtailment of your rights, but you cannot consent to the curtailment of mine. To Jefferson, government can take away your rights without your consent only if you have violated someone else's rights. It cannot do so by majority vote. The second radical concept that underscores the Declaration of Independence is that no government is valid unless it enjoys the consent of the government. This, too, was unheard of in 1776 because British kings did not claim consent of the governed as the basis for their legitimacy. They claimed the myth that their monarchies were an extension of God's will. In America, consent of the governed is married to the natural law. Under the natural law, what is yours and what is mine is mine. If I attempt to take your land or car or cell phone, you can stop me either directly or through the government to which we have both consented. If one of us has not consented to the government's existence, it can still enforce natural rights as the agent of the person whose rights are being violated, just as it does for bank depositors when it captures a bank robber. If we have not consented to the government and it takes our liberty or property, it has no moral legitimacy and is merely a common thief. Today, the Jeffersonian ideals of personal natural rights and governmental legitimacy conditioned upon the individual consent of the governed have themselves become myths. In Jefferson's day, the voters knew all that the government did, and it knew nothing about them. Today, government operates largely in secrecy, and it captures our every communication. In Jefferson's day, the government needed the people's expressed permission to tax and regulate them. Today, the people need the government's permission to do nearly everything. In Jefferson's day, his colleagues fought for independence from England. Today, half the country is dependent on the government. Did you consent to a Congress that steals liberty and property on a whim without due process, to a president who starts wars, raises taxes, and spends money in defiance of Congress, or to courts that let folks be tried for the same crime and punished for crimes not yet committed? Welcome to Independence Day 2019. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, wilmingtonbigtalker.com. We're going to take a short break, after which we will return with still more critical information better enabling you to defend your gun rights. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. The destruction of American society is not an accident, but the culmination of a deliberate effort. Not a grand conspiracy, since people can't keep secrets, but, as a sage once said, you don't have to be a member of the choir to sing from the same piece of sheet music. A friend forwarded a video from author and commentator Trevor Loudon and the Epoch Times, which explains clearly the dynamics behind the open border movement. It's called Behind the Push for Open Borders, and here it is.
So this is an orchestrated communist assault on America to destroy America's borders, to create confusion in America, to overwhelm the system politically, because America is the main enemy. If you can't bring it down through nuclear weapons, you bring it down through illegal immigration, which is maybe just as effective in the long run. You can see what 15, 16, 20, 25 million new Democratic voters is going to do to this country. You will lose Texas, you will lose Florida, you will lose Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina. There will never be, ever, another Republican or conservative president in our lifetimes. You will have a one-party state in America, and that is the plan. That is why they are doing this. And this is Marxist, this is Leninist, and this goes back to American politicians cooperating with hostile foreign powers in the destruction of America. And the number one weapon is illegal immigration and overwhelming the border. That's what they are doing. If that's not a national emergency, I cannot comprehend what is. What could be more pressing and more dangerous than this? The Democrats 25 years ago, they were the party leading the charge against illegal immigration. They were the party. You look up on C-SPAN and see speeches by Harry Reid and Bill Clinton condemning illegal immigration in the harshest terms. This is a national security threat. This is taking the jobs of American workers. This is destroying their livelihood. We must end this. They sounded like Tea Party guys. And now they're completely in favour of it because they've so destroyed their own base amongst the sort of Pennsylvania Union guys, the middle class in this country. They've so destroyed their own base, they have to import new voters. And where are they going to come from? It was a very easy source for that. The borders would be dissolved effectively. There would be no effective border security. And all the Democrat candidates are united on this. All of them, not one of them has made a stand against what is happening on the border. They're all for amnesty. They're all for welcoming, illegals over the border. So you would see the end of America as we know it, because we would get so many million people coming over. They would be given citizenship and voting rights, and they would vote for the party that let them in. Ultimately, these guys, they want power. These Democrat leaders, they're going to live in gated communities. They're going to be living high off the fat of the land. All the rest of us will be living in poverty and destitution. But that's okay. Every communist dictator lives in prosperity. Every communist dictator has all the luxuries they want. They don't care what happens to us. We're just expendable to them. And so they have the same mentality. They want power at any cost. And they know illegal immigration is hurting American workers. They know it's taken jobs from young black kids in black communities. They know it's bringing disease and public health dangers. They know the open borders are killing 60,000 Americans a year through the importation of fentanyl from China and cocaine and heroin from South America. They know all that, but they're still willing to go along with it because power comes first. And this is the road to absolute power for them. MIT says there's 22 million illegals in the country now. And we all know on present patterns they will vote 80% Democrat at least. Well, that gives the Democrats 15 or 16 million votes just straight off the top. And when you consider that Mitt Romney lost his election by 2.5 million votes and Donald Trump won by 200,000 thanks to the Electoral College and actually lost the popular vote by 3 million. Make it clear, America was never a democracy. It was a constitutional republic where the will of the majority was tempered by things like the Electoral College to make sure big population centres did not dominate small population centres. So the left wants to get rid of that. They want to flood the system with illegals. They want to basically undermine the electoral system so that they rule forever. You know, and as Stalin famously said, it's not who votes that counts, it's who counts the votes that counts. So if they're in control of the voting process, they're in control of counting the votes and apportioning out electoral districts, they get rid of the national popular vote, no matter how unpopular they become, no matter how cruel they are, how corrupt they are, and how much the economy crashes, they can never be voted out of power. They will have a permanent blank check on power in this country. And even a die-hard Democrat should be terrified of that situation. You know, to give one party a monopoly on this country, I don't care if it's the best political party in the world. If you give them a complete monopoly on power for all time, that is a recipe for corruption and tyranny. Because all power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I don't care if you had St. Peter leading the party. You have a monopoly on power, you become corrupt. And everybody in this country should be terrified of that prospect. You've got a whole voting base who has no comprehension of the consequences of what they're doing. They still think they're voting for Harry Truman and JFK. They don't see that this is an either-or situation, that the Democrats are on the verge of an unbeatable permanent majority. This is a race against time. What's it going to be, 1 million this year? 1.5, 2 million next year? We saw 1 million Muslims driven into Germany recently with all of the social consequences that entailed. Well, the pool of potential refugees from Latin America is way bigger than the people who come out of Syria. Well, how many people live below the border? You know, you're talking a couple of 100 million in Latin America. You could have 3, 4, 5 million people trying to get it. I think President Trump is hoping it'll slow down, but if it's not, I think he's going to have to be tough on Mexico. Until he can get control of the US House again, I don't see how he's going to stop this, but he has to. So if I was the president, what I would be doing, I would say to the president of Mexico, if you do not stop this flow, and the president of Mexico is a Marxist, AMLO, we will shut down trade. We will shut down everything. Because this is an act of war. It may come to the point where he just has to bite the bullet and say the border is sealed. But even that's not going to stop the problem entirely, because people will still claim refugee status under existing law. So I think the answer must be to put huge pressure on Mexico to stop the problem internally, because they could do it if they wanted to. By not doing it, they're basically declaring war on the United States, and that needs some tough measures. This whole move for illegal immigration, amnesty, dissolving the border, goes right back to the Soviet days, you know, when the Communist Party USA was working on the border to bring people across, to train up the sort of amnesty movement people. I'm talking, back in the 70s or even before that. And so, with people like Bert Corona, the famous Communist Party member from California, who was heavily involved in this, and he had a whole network across the southern border states of Communist Party members and radicals who were fostering this movement. Because it was designed, there's two aspects of it. One was to fill the southern states with Mexicans and Latin Americans to eventually wrest the southern states back from Mexico, and also to increase the Democratic Party rolls. And so Corona was working with people like, I've got a letter from the 70s asking for Corona and Cesar Chavez and others in this network to find promising young Chicano activists to send to Moscow to train at Patrice Lumumba School, the big training school for foreign communists, to teach them about revolution through promoting Aztlan, the return of the southern states to Mexico. This is old, and now it's being supported by Sin Fronteras out of Chicago, which is run by the Lozano family, they're running a lot of this support networks for the people jumping the border. And they're a Communist Party family, pro-Soviet Communist Party family since a long time back. And then you've got Acorn working down in Honduras, and they worked on voter registration all over the states. But now they are, I believe, also driving the caravans up. I've been told stories about this, but nothing I can prove, that the Cubans are also involved in this, and the left-wing forces in Honduras as well.
After our break, we will return with more information enabling you to better defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. Let's talk about recent developments at the National Rifle Association. You've probably heard something about the recent trials and tribulations at the NRA. What you know, of course, is the NRA is the largest gun rights organization in the U.S., founded in 1871, initially by two former Union officers who despaired over their wartime recruits' poor shooting skills, that eventually became the largest governing body for shooting sports. In recent years, the NRA has claimed a membership of nearly 5 million. What might surprise you, or perhaps not if you are among the NRA's critics, is that the NRA has not always opposed gun control. As FDR began to usurp power to the federal government, the NRA assented to passage of the National Firearms Act of 1934, regulating machine guns, short-barreled rifles and shotguns, sound suppressors and destructive devices, and also the Federal Firearms Act of 1938, which created the system of federally licensed dealers. Indeed, the NRA has traditionally been a sportsman's organization, not the hardcore gun rights organization the media would have you believe. But the NRA's role began to change in the upheaval and political assassinations of the 1960s, particularly during the struggle over the Draconian Gun Control Act of 1968, which for the first time systematically regulated both foreign and interstate commerce in firearms, banned the importation of guns which were not deemed to have a legitimate sporting purpose. Yes, that dogs us to this day. Banning interstate sales except through federally licensed dealers, and creating a class of people prohibited from owning guns. What most people don't know is that thanks to the early legislative efforts of the NRA, we narrowly dodged a bullet. President Lyndon B. Johnson wanted national gun registration and licensing, which would likely have been the beginning of the end for private gun ownership. My good friend, the late Neil Knox, told me about the heady days of fighting against GCA 68. Working with Harlan Carter, Neil helped make the NRA the political juggernaut it is today. But the sportsman mentality continued to dominate the NRA until the Cincinnati Revolution at the 1977 NRA convention, when Carter and Knox headed so-called hardliners in wresting control of the organization. Neil became head of the NRA's new Institute for Legislative Action, or ILA, and even though Carter fired him in 1982, Neil got himself elected to the NRA Board of Directors in 1991 and eventually became NRA first vice president. that's when the trouble began. Neil began bird-dogging the overbilling and other abuses of a political consulting group hired by Wayne LaPierre and Company, namely one Ackerman McQueen, also known as ACMAC. Neil's perhaps quixotic quest to reform the NRA continued until his death from cancer in 2005. And what is happening at the NRA today would be no surprise to Neil. The NRA, in response to Neil, began its long-standing practice of circling the wagons against reformers. Allow me to quote from an AmmoLand.com article by Jeff Knox, Neil's son and current co-director of the Firearms Coalition that Neil started. Quote, "The upshot of the battle was that Wayne won, Dad lost, and the fast and loose money games continued and just got worse. Charlton Heston was brought in to bump Dad from the leadership, and Wayne's compensation rose rapidly from about $250,000 a year to almost $1 million. In the latest available IRS report from 2017, LaPierre's compensation was reported at $1.4 million, and a couple of years before that, he also got a distribution from his retirement fund of about $4 million for a total compensation of more than $5 million. It's worth noting that he is receiving this at a time when the NRA is over $30 million in the red and the retirement fund is in negative numbers to the tune of almost $60 million. ACMAC's take from the NRA in 2017 was over $40 million. And so we arrive at our present situation. In April, the New Yorker magazine broke a piece entitled Secrecy, Self-Dealing, and Greed at the NRA. Although the piece was written by Michael Spies of billionaire Michael Bloomberg's anti-gun propaganda organ called The Trace, the bad news is that it wasn't wrong. In painful detail, the New Yorker revealed decades-long feather bedding by LaPierre and his cohorts. And indeed, at roughly the same time, the NRA filed a lawsuit against ACMAC alleging overbilling and other wrongs. The suit demands that ACMAC justify its billing for services provided, including NRA TV. What most people don't know is that NRA spokespersons such as Dana Lash and Colin Noir work not for the NRA but for ACMAC. This marketing spending accounts for 14% of the gun rights group's total budget, totaling more than $42 million in 2017. In June, the Wall Street Journal reported that LaPierre billed the group's ad agency $39,000 for one day of shopping at a Beverly Hills clothing boutique, $18,300 for a car and driver in Europe, and had the agency cover $13,800 in rent for a summer intern, according to newly revealed NRA internal documents. The documents, posted anonymously on the Internet, provide new details of the clothing, travel, and other expenses totaling more than $542,000 that ACMAC alleges LaPierre billed to it. On this show, Jeff Knox, who has continued his father's quest to reform the NRA, speculated that the lawsuit was actually a defensive move on the part of NRA leadership to cover its collective butt. You see, in April, the anti-gun Attorney General of the anti-gun state of New York began an investigation of the NRA, which is unfortunately incorporated in that state. According to CNN, the probe centers on, quote, related party transactions between the NRA and its board members, authorized, unauthorized political activity, and potentially false or misleading disclosures in regulatory filings. Then, at an annual meeting, also in April, Oliver North announced he was stepping down as NRA president after what is reported to have been a failed effort to extract the resignation of Wayne LaPierre. Initially, the NRA Board of Directors came out in support of LaPierre and Company. But more recently, prominent board members and other public figures have begun to quietly defect. In late May, retired Lieutenant Colonel Alan West announced that he was withdrawing support from LaPierre and had previously urged him to resign before the group's annual meeting in Indianapolis. In the New York Daily News, West wrote, quote, there is a cabal of cronyism operating within the NRA, and that exists within the board of directors. It must cease, and I do not care if I draw their angst. In June, one of the NRA's prominent board members, Pete Brownell of the huge Brownell's firearm and accessory retailer, also resigned. and in pro-gun media, prominent figures such as Mark Walters of Armed American Radio have begun to tear into LaPierre. In recent days, a prominent and large donor has said he's not giving any more money to the NRA. The anti-gun media and gun control organizations have of course, piled on. As the New Yorker article broke, Every Town for Gun Safety, Michael Bloomberg's gun control organization, filed a request with the IRS for investigation of the NRA's tax-exempt status. The New York Times celebrated with an article entitled, At the NRA, a Cash Machine Sputtering. And the Washington Post attempted to exploit NRA problems by claiming they stem from being too extremist. The article is entitled, Newtown Massacre Divided NRA Leaders Foreshadowing Split to Come, as though that was somehow a reason. And then most recently, the NRA suspended Chris Cox, head of the NRA's Institute for Legislative Action, who has been the group's public face and effectively the number 2 leader at the group. According to the New York Times, the accusation came in a lawsuit filed in New York State Supreme Court against Oliver North, the NRA's former president, who led the attempt to oust LaPierre shortly before the group's annual convention in April. The complaint provides new details about the effort against LaPierre, but it is the involvement of the organization's number 2 official, Christopher W. Cox, that will reverberate. In the suit, the NRA said that text messages and emails demonstrated another errant fiduciary, Chris Cox, once thought to be a likely successor for LaPierre, participated in what was described as a conspiracy. What all this means for the future of the gun rights movement in the United States remains to be seen. But I can say one thing with relative certainty. Based on the recent absenteeism in the state legislature, it is a safe bet the NRA will take a much reduced role in the 2020 elections, meaning less money for pro-gun candidates and fewer independent expenditures such as mailings and advertising for those candidates. Given how critical the 2020 elections will be for gun rights, I am vowing that our Political Action Committee, the Grassroots North Carolina Political Victory Fund, will do its best to take up the slack and elect pro-gun candidates here in North Carolina. What I am asking you to do is to help us by contributing to the GRNC Political Victory Fund by going to grnc.org and clicking on the drop-down menu for GRNC Political Victory Fund. Again, go to grnc.org and click on the drop-down menu for GRNC Political Victory Fund. Right now, you're listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom. After a short break, we will return with still more critical information enabling you to defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. Well, grab a pen, folks, because I want you to write this down. In our last segment, we discussed the internal abuses and struggle being suffered by the NRA. Now, I don't care where you stand on the issue. I don't care whether you love or hate the NRA. What I care about is this. If you value the right to keep and bear arms, understand that thanks to internal strife, the NRA may be largely AWOL in the 2020 elections. Now, that means keeping our republic and the freedoms reinforced by the Bill of Rights is up to us. So I am asking you to contribute to the Political Action Committee that helps pro-gun candidates here in North Carolina. That is the Grassroots North Carolina Political Victory Fund, or GRNC-PVF. I want you to help by contributing, and I want you to go to grnc.org. grnc.org, and click on the drop-down menu for the GRNC Political Victory Fund at the top of the page. Again, go to grnc.org, click on the drop-down menu for GRNC Political Victory Fund at the top of the page. As always, defending the Second Amendment depends on you. Well, mark your calendar because hell has indeed frozen over. Yes, indeed, for the first and likely last time ever, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I agree. No, I have not decided in favor of banning airplanes or cows or cars or whatever whacked-out scheme she's come up with this week. No, I have not discovered Mao and become a socialist. And no, I have not embraced social justice. But AOC finally said something that makes sense. Just last week, this purveyor of 21st century socialist wisdom pontificated that, and I quote, "the U.S. is headed to fascism." Of course, we might have a teensy-weensy little disagreement over who the fascists are, but never mind that for now. To the winsome congressperson from the People's Republic of New York, from which, by the way, I am an unfortunate refugee, the fascists are you and I, and of course Donald Trump. Here is what AOC had to say. Quote, "Are we headed to fascism? Yes, I don't think there's a question," the Congresswoman told Yahoo News after she toured the detention facilities run by Customs and Border Protection. Quote, "If you actually take the time to study and look at the steps and to see how government transforms under authoritarian regimes and look at the political decisions and patterns of this president, the answer is yes." You heard it right. To Alexandria Idiot Communist, controlling the border is fascism. Which, of course, makes perfect sense when you consider that this is the sage who referred to border detention facilities as concentration camps. And, of course, we are talking about the wild-eyed zealot who claims illegal aliens are being forced to drink from toilets and that she felt unsafe around the Customs and Border Patrol agents. Now, pay no attention to the fact that Democrats are the ones who denied the crisis and called it manufactured, right up until they blamed Donald Trump, of course, or that the Democrat-controlled U.S. House has consistently refused to deal with illegal immigration, or that Democrats fight each and every effort to control illegal immigration, or that leftist judges from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals stymie every last effort by the Trump administration to stem the tidal wave coming across our southern border. Nope. AOC expressed exactly who they want you to believe is to blame when she said, and I quote, "This is completely engineered by him." But AOC has finally gotten one, and just one thing right in her miserable little socialist delusional life, bless her little heart. The U.S. is indeed running headlong toward fascism. Please don't call these fascists liberals. They aren't liberal at all. Hell, in a classic Jeffersonian sense, I am a liberal, and so likely are you. Liberals don't impose their will on other people. Liberals look for individual freedom and defend the Bill of Rights. Nope, in every sense of the word, the American left is fascist, complete with, in the left-wing media, a propaganda machine that would make Joseph Goebbels proud. And in the arm of brown shirts calling itself Antifa, the thugs who strong-arm you into compliance in the event you have the audacity to express a contrary opinion in a public place. You see, in Orwell's 1984, the Ministry of Truth tells lies. The Ministry of Love sows fear. The Ministry of Plenty administers poverty, and the Ministry of Peace wages war. So too, in modern America, the self-proclaimed anti-fascists promote fascism with a tire iron. But even all of this pales beside the effort to control your thoughts. Even 50 years ago, would people have thought that there would be a long list of previously used common words that could no longer be uttered, even in a private message, much less in public? Would they have thought that asking a question about citizenship on a census form would be considered racist? Or, for that matter, that a whole range of functions which are indeed within the intended powers of the government, unlike all the powers that the government has usurped or stolen, including gun control, because under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, there is no provision for the federal government to regulate firearms. Another matter. But who would have thought that all of these properly intended powers of government, things like crime control, border control, or, perhaps most importantly, the fair administration of justice, a system in which you are innocent until proven guilty, who would have thought that 50 years ago, if you had asked an average person, how do you think they would have responded to these things if you called them racist? They would have looked at you like you're mad. But in 21st century America, racist they indeed are. They are called racist or hate speech, not in the interest of offending anyone, although that is, of course, what you are being told, but in the interest of controlling what you think. Because to the fascists of the left, language is used to bludgeon you into compliance. Words have no specific meaning. They are just bludgeons. Rest assured that thought crime is indeed alive and well in 21st century America. Orwell called it newspeak, a language in which words are banned or redefined, or in some cases have malleable definitions, as necessary to create the preordained totalitarian state. Please allow me to leave you today with a quote from 1984. Don't you see that the whole aim of newspeak is to narrow the range of thought? In the end, we shall make thought crime literally impossible because there will be no words in which to express it. Every concept that can ever be needed will be expressed by exactly one word, with its meaning rigidly defined and all of its subsidiary meanings rubbed out and forgotten. The process will still be continuing long after you and I are dead. Every year, fewer and fewer words, and the range of consciousness gets a little smaller. Even now, of course, there's no reason or excuse for committing thought crime. It's merely a question of self-discipline, reality control. But in the end, there won't be any need even for that. Has it ever occurred to you, Winston, that by the year 2050, at the very latest, not a single human being will be alive who could understand such a conversation as we are having now? My name is Paul Vallone. You've been listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, where each Sunday at 5 p.m. as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. Please check out our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest shop, at hyattgun.com. See you next Sunday at 5.